Good morning. This is Denny Costerison. I'm the Executive Director for the Indiana Association of School Business Officials, and I'd like to thank you for being part of our webinar today. First of all, before I go on, I just hope everyone is safe and healthy, and that we keep moving forward with that. First, I'd like to thank the Indiana Bond Bank for reaching out to Indiana IASBO to be a co-sponsor of this webinar. We appreciate that greatly. We've had a wonderful relationship with the bond bank for years, and again, we do appreciate them reaching out to us. It's now my pleasure to introduce Mark Wollner. Mark is the Executive Director for the Indiana Bond Bank, who will begin the presentation. Thank you for attending.
Well, thank you, Denny, and thank you all the school business officials on the line. We sincerely at the Indiana Bond Bank appreciate our partnership, longstanding partnership with IASBO over the years. It's just been, I think, through thick and thin, we've worked with schools over the years, and we find ourselves in very interesting times now, and this is no different, where we're looking to stand side by side with schools and school business officials as you try to navigate what is certainly an unprecedented time, certainly in most of our lifetimes. To Denny's point, I hope you are all safe and well. I know, especially in our household with our kids, we just recognize again the value of schools and public education to the extent that we didn't before, even so much more now. And the work that you all do and your buildings and all your staff are certainly so valued in the state. And we know you continue even remotely to do great work and great things for Indiana communities, and we certainly thank you for that. And so we're just honored to be here. We've got a very kind of a small slice of the COVID-19 fight from a financial perspective, but to whatever extent that our team can assist you kind of navigate these waters, this is what our bond bank team here is for. It's what we do. So with that, really excited to have you today, and let's just jump right in. Probably first off, just want to talk about who we are at the Indiana Bond Bank. So hopefully many of you have heard of us, worked with us, seen us at Indiana IASBO events. The Bond Bank is a public sector entity, much like yourself. So we are just existing at the state level, and our mission in life is to ensure that all local units of government, all thinks from townships to counties, cities and towns, schools, police and fire districts, libraries, all those fundamental threads that make communities shine, that you're thriving. And we kind of stand behind the scenes and try to provide you tools and resources to assist you with targeted financial solutions to unique problems that you may face. I know with schools, perhaps over the years, we've worked you with acquiring one-to-one technology with computers or school buses through our equipment lease purchase program. Some of you may have participated in a tax anticipation warrant program or advanced funding program in the past. So we've been just pleased to work with schools and have a strong relationship with schools over the years. I think it's always helpful, especially in these times when we're so remote and virtual, to put faces and names together. You should see smiling faces in front of you on the screen. This is the team I'm pleased to have on the phone with us today. Again, I'm Mark Wollner, the Executive Director of the Indiana Bond Bank. We also have Ron Mangus on the phone. I hope many, if not all of you, know Ron. Ron's been with the Bond Bank for many years, and I know has worked well with many of you over the years as our Director of Operations. Dennis Otten serves as local unit of government counsel for the resource that we're going to talk about with you today. And Dennis is with Bose McKinney & Evans. Angie Stino is our municipal advisor with Crow LLP, and then Bradley Bingham is our bond counsel with Barnes & Thornburg. And so all of our team is here on the phone. We hope that this is a good dialogue, that you feel free to ask questions. And so just, I think before we jump in too far, as a matter of housekeeping, you should all have a strip of kind of a navigation portal of information of the webcam, the audio. You should have a drop down on that GoToWebinar thread that says questions. You also have one that says chat. So to whatever extent you have a question anytime during our conversation, please just jump in, throw it in the question box, throw it in the chat, and we will be happy to have a dialogue, because we know this is an ever evolving situation. The questions you might have had yesterday may have been answered, and the questions you have today may not be the ones you have tomorrow. And so really looking forward to hearing your questions, your thoughts, your concerns, and that helps us, frankly, build a better tool for you to use as we move forward. So what brings us together? I think many of you are probably aware that in response to COVID-19, Governor Holcomb took quick action and issued Executive Order 20-05, which, among other things, requires counties to waive penalties on property taxes made for 60 days after May the 11th. Great move for the economy. Obviously, as our local units of government then take stock for themselves, they realize that revenues that they may have anticipated coming in at a certain time in that first distribution, may be delayed and may not be paid until later. And so this could cause cash burdens on units of government. As we flip to the next, I think really, as we talk about what does this mean for youth, really there's, I think one thing, it's kind of very easy kind of health check for you as a school business official is just big picture when you pull the camera back. Do we have any fixed, non-negotiable expenditures? And I'm, thinking things like debt service payments. Do you have an end of June, beginning of July bond payment due, for example? Something that's non-negotiable has to be paid. I think then you're going to balance that against how you project COVID-19 to impact your projected receipts. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways that can play out, and we can certainly talk through how to make those projections depending on where you're situated. And then thirdly, just looking at kind of your projected receipts, your existing resources, and other tools available, including the bond bank tool. I think really thinking through, do we need a bond bank tools to do short-term cash flow borrowing, or are there other ways we might meet our obligations, those big non-negotiable expenditures? So really, we want to arm you with just another tool in your toolbox. For some, I think this will be a kind of a rehash of a program that you've used. Others, this may be a new tool. There's the bond bank. Heard from our customers, our schools, our communities, folks that we work with, professionals who work with you. We realized we had a tool that exists to meet cash flow disruption perfectly. And what we needed to do was to streamline it, to scale it up, and to customize it to meet the needs of COVID-19. But the good thing is that we realized, and that I want to assure you, is this is the same tool that we're going to talk about today is the same one that has existed for over 30 years, has served Indiana units of government, including schools, in times of great need in the past, during delays and reassessments in the mid-2000s. The program scaled up considerably to meet those needs. And as you can see, some of the numbers are just incredible, that over $13.5 billion in short-term cash flow assistance has been issued since 1989. So if nothing else, know that this program it's very templated, probably not a real word. My teachers would get mad if I used that word, but we've got templates. We've got a team that's done this program for years and years. The benefit of this program, I think, are multiple. Should you need cash flow assistance, you've got a team with a public sector mindset. So just like you, we're in this for the mission, and looking to serve you and your needs. So you're going to get some hands-on technical assistance, some hands-on work through the process. We provide the ability to pool with other entities. So rather than kind of going and trying to do this on a one-off basis, with another institution who may not work with municipal government too often, or may have to build the mousetrap for you as you go through. We've got an efficient market access where you're pooling and sharing all these costs together across many, many different entities. And if you think back to the slide with the team, and all our smiling faces. We provide kind of out of the box all your resources. So your legal documents were provided, as well as the attorney to help get those done. We've got bond counsel, we've got a municipal advisor to review your cash flows. And so it's a very turnkey process if you're looking for something very simple to get you through this, this interesting time. I'm going to advance to the next slide here. And let me just pop out, just checking the question box. So our next slide, we have, again, I want to zoom out and just take a look at what if we're playing a board game here, if you're starting on Go here, Monopoly board, and working your way down, down the board, your first step really is to complete a participation survey. And that is a non-binding, one-page, really it's an indication of interest of, hey, we're looking at potential receipts, we're looking at expenditures, and we may need to participate in the program, may need to use your tax anticipation warrant program. And that notifies us that you may have a need and allows us to get in contact with you and assist you through that process. We'll review your application and cash flows as we get further down the board, helping you assess kind of whether you have a true need to borrow, and if so, what that amount is. And then we've, of course, at the end, disperse financial assistance to you. That's a very, very high level overview of what is a short-term borrowing program. What we did here in response to COVID-19, I think, want to highlight this, is that we know that it's not going to affect each of you the same way. Maybe you have different expenditures, you have different receipts. Some of you live in counties where the escrowed property taxes are going to be higher because there's a higher home ownership percentage than other counties. Escrowed property tax receipts, as a side note, are still due on May 11th. And so perhaps if you live in a county or you work in a county where that home ownership percentage of those mortgaged property tax percentages are higher, those escrowed money should still come on time. And so maybe receipts are steadier than perhaps a county where there's a higher percentage of non-escrowed payments that could be coming later due to the COVID-19 and the 60-day penalty waiver. So what we did is, recognizing everybody's going to be affected differently, we are offering 4 closing dates over the course of the summer, just based on when your need is going to hit. Because we know if you borrow, many of you don't want to borrow longer than you have to. And so we recognize that and created those deadlines and those new closing dates. I'd like to show those to you now. So you should see, give my screen a second here to load. So the 4 columns in front of you, really what we're calling our early May, late June, and late July rounds. It's really, and for you, keying in on that last row at the bottom, when do you need funds by? If you need them by May the 7th, that round is, that train is leaving the station very, very quickly. But should you be in an emergency situation, if we can work with you to get the legal documents in place quickly, we can still, I think if you let us know today or tomorrow, get you in that queue for that May the 7th round. Otherwise, as you're assessing your situation, again, we've got opportunities for you to participate in the program, anywhere from the end of May through the end of July. And you can see the timeline for applications coming in by that time. All this information, this timeline, is on our website. We'll make this available certainly after this presentation, after this webinar, to all of you. And it says at the bottom, the schedule is subject to change. I want to be clear that means these dates are fixed and we're committed to meeting your needs during these times. So if you're coming at the end of May, you will have funds on May the 28th. If you're coming in June, you'll have your funds June the 25th, et cetera. Really what we're trying to say is that, should the need continue or be exacerbated, or something new come up, if COVID doesn't quite kind of run its course the way we hope it does, we're certainly open to and will serve needs in August or September or October should those come up. And so really this is our, our first best iteration based on the feedback we've already gotten from some of you and your professionals about kind of the highest level of need here in the state. But again, we want you to know that we're nimble, we're flexible, and we're prepared to offer additional funding rounds should you need them. Dennis, you have questions, please feel free to use the question box. So if you remember, the kind of first square on the Monopoly board as you passed go was a participation survey. And I can't emphasize enough, that is just a very simple radio button. If you complete that online, it's just a checkbox. Yes, I think I may need the bond banks program, kind of keep me on your radar, and then allows you to check from a multiple choice box of which of those potential closing dates you need the funds by. And that allows us to start getting you documents, having our council and our municipal advisors start to work with you, and it kind of gets you in that pool. To date, as of yesterday, just to give you a sense, we've had over 70 participation surveys completed and spread, certainly mixed throughout end of May and end of June, have had the highest demand to this point. And I think as folks start to get some of those receipts in from that, after that May 11th collection, we'll probably start to see some more for the end of July as folks start to get a handle on what that first distribution looks like for them. Great, we have some good questions coming in, and we will get to those. So after you do the participation survey, the bond bank will send you an application, and the application consists of two parts. It's a credit application, which provides us your name, who you are, and particularly in these times, I think it's critical if you're working off a cell phone or a non-school email for whatever reason, please let us know that, because we know it's not so easy necessarily, not so easy to contact everyone, and you may not be in the same work situation that you were even 2 months ago. Some of the information needed on the credit application, is required by investors if we were to sell this to the open market. I think many of you who have debt or have done bond issues are familiar with some of the questions that are asked on that credit application. And then there's the cash flow, and that's really the worksheet that helps look at your historical revenues and expenditures, works with you to project ahead. It's essentially a mini budgeting tool, and it really helps us look forward and forecast how to size your interim borrowing here. All right, so let's jump into a couple of questions here. So I've got, we've got a couple of questions that we've heard sometimes from other entities, and that one, as you can see, is how much are you eligible to borrow? And the ceiling, as you can see, is the lesser of your largest projected cash deficit in the next 6 months, or 80% of your anticipated property taxes or December tuition support. Then I see, what if our entity is uncertain of the amount of the distribution or property taxes from the county? I think even before you assume that worst case, it may be worth just reaching out to your county auditor and just having a conversation with them, getting a sense. We're also getting some data from the DLGF in terms of which counties and their percentages of escrowed versus non-escrowed payments. And so that may help you, that data may help you make some projections. And I would also say Angie from our team is available to help kind of with that sizing, because we know it's there's a lot of uncertainty in this time. Angie, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add on that second question.
No, Mark, I think you did a good job. I think we're seeing as cash flows are coming in, I think there are different assumptions. So we would just, I would just say caution folks as well from showing everything coming in June, allowing that there's probably going to be some type of distribution receipted in June. But then again, if you do request an advance draw, expect to receive probably funds coming in August as well. So again, as Mark said, happy to walk through by phone or email with anyone who's filling out cash flows and has questions. And I can also share any information that I'm seeing coming in from the different counties as well. So here is a resource to help.
And I'm glad you mentioned advanced draws. Denny raised that right before we went live on the webinar. It's a great question. I think he indicated that some of you reached out to him and asked about kind of what those advanced draws may look like. And Brad, I don't know if you're on the phone, if you want to jump in and talk about what we've heard thus far about advanced draws and what the bond bank's role is going to be.
Yeah, happy to do that. So as some of you may know, there is a process by which you can request from your county auditor and treasurer an advancement of property taxes prior to the actual settlement date. I think in some counties this is common practice, and in others it is not. So it may be a surprise or new to some folks. But we've had conversations with DLGF as well as the state auditor's office, and our understanding is that any property tax payments that come in after the June settlement will technically become part of the December settlement. However, the state auditor is advising county auditors and treasurers that they make an advancement of any taxes that are collected on or before July 10th. Because they advance those to the underlying taxing units in recognition that that's really part of what should have been part of the June settlement. So for any of the borrowers through the bond bank's program, we've been aware of this and we're working on it. So we will make sure that any borrowers in the bond bank's program, we will actually on your behalf be filing an advancement request with your county auditor, requesting that there be an advance by August 15. So that's the expectation in terms of getting the delayed property tax payments to you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Brad. Question from Serena. She asked if we can repeat the answer to what tool we can use to see what we may collect from escrow. I don't know, Angie, if you want to jump in, I can start. I know we've gotten some initial data from the Department of Local Government Finance on county by county, which that percentage of escrow versus non-escrow.
Yeah, Mark, we've had conversations with AIC on a lot of that data they were starting to collect from their membership to get a sense. If you want to reach out, I can share the information that we have on some counties. Not all, we weren't able to collect all the data, so I think we had a handful of counties to get a sense of what that percentage is on the escrow base. I would also just make sure that you, when you are looking at that data, to keep in mind that that's kind of county-wide. So it could vary, though, for your individual taxing unit in the district that you make up. So I think it's a good kind of thumbnail to get a sense of what the overall county looks like on the escrows, but it may not be applicable to your specific taxing unit and district, depending on how you overlay with the county and where your school is actually located. But if there's questions on that, just email the bond bank and on where you're located. I can kind of give you information that we've started to gather thus far.
Hey, Mark, this is Ron. I've received a couple of questions. The first one is, if we submit a survey, how long does it take to get the application materials? And the answer to that is we have someone on staff checking that 3 times a day. So hopefully if you emailed something late last night, we're getting you something here soon. If not, if we've missed the email or it got caught in our spam, please email midyear@imbondbank.com and we'll make sure we get the application materials. The second question that I have, and Angie, if you could answer this one, and this is regarding the application. On the application, what is the difference between a participating and non-participating fund? A federal grant would be non-participating, but we're thinking only about the education, debt service and operation, and property tax funds.
Yeah, so the reason for that question, it's actually a really important question for the rating agency. So when we submit your application and cash flows onto the rating agencies, when we get to that larger note issuance, they're always want to look to see what does the school's profile look like on its own. So a key question is, what other funds are out there that you're not borrowing in? So a participating fund, those are those funds that you actually plan to borrow and you've submitted a cash flow. Those cash flows we share with the rating agencies, and then they can look at that ending fund balance to get a good understanding of what you expect to end the year. Non-participating funds would be any of the other funds where you receive revenues that that really just give your overall financial picture. So if you're looking at your Form 9 and any other funds where you have a balance, say for example, you are participating and you need to borrow in your debt service fund, but you're not going to borrow in your operations fund, then we would want to see your operations fund listed there and an estimated ending cash balance. So that's what that's going to, Ron. Really just allowing rating agencies to get a good understanding of what other fund balances the school has that they're not seeing cash flows for.
Thanks, Angie.
Great questions. And let's see, we've got some other questions. The one that says we don't have audio. I hope we've fixed that, because otherwise I've just been talking into a dead microphone this whole time, so that wouldn't be any fun. Let's see. What are the costs or fees to participate? Sherry, that's a great question. And it's one you should be asking as a school business official who's fiscally responsible, as all our Indiana schools are. So I'll say there's no out-of-pocket cost to participate, no fee to apply to the program. Of course, we have professional costs, and we have costs to go to market, as you would with any program. And so what we found to be most efficient over these 30 years is by pooling these or spreading your costs across all the participants, by having a dedicated advisor for each of the different roles. We keep those costs streamlined, and then those become part of the interest rate when we price. And so interest rates are set at the various dates of closing, just again based on market. But rest assured that we over the course of the years with this program, we look for that most efficient and that best cost of funds for you. And some years that's the capital markets, and some years that's a private placement. And we know this year there's even this Federal Reserve program that they've just discussed, I guess a week ago today, the municipal liquidity facility, which there's many unknowns about. But again, I raise that to say we've got our eyes open on every potential option to place these notes in a way that provides lowest cost of funds for you. By participating in this program, I think versus borrowing elsewhere, you're doing what's within your influence and control to keep your costs low by making a conscious decision to cost share, versus going out and potentially incurring all those costs on a standalone basis for somebody to build that mousetrap for you. Again, wish we could control the market and the interest rates. We can't, but you can control, I think, your decision in terms of where you get market access. And I think that's where, as a public sector entity, we really provide a great value proposition for you. Corey asks, what is the typical term of these borrowings, and can they be repaid sooner? I'm so glad you asked that, Corey. Can't believe we haven't talked about that, because that is probably that third avenue of flexibility that we've added beyond multiple closing dates, beyond streamlining some of that application. The third thing we've done is really look to be flexible with repayment terms. Angie or Brad, I don't know if you wanted to speak to how we've approached that this year.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I just, if anybody's participated in this program in the past, you probably are aware that it's typically at least a 6-month or perhaps a 1-year borrowing. It's sort of a longer term in that regard. This year, in light of the unique circumstances and the recognition of what's causing this, we're actually setting it up so that if you borrow in any one of these funding dates that Mark alluded to earlier, you'll have the ability to prepay or to pay that off roughly 30 days later. So we try to set it up so that you can get in and get out of the program fairly quickly in order to minimize your interest expense. I mean, we don't want to lock you into a 6-month borrowing if that's really not necessary. So that's just the key, the overall kind of features, that you can borrow and pay it off roughly 30 days later if you choose to do so.
Thank you, Brad. I just want to pull up again what those dates were to give you a sense of the term that we may be talking about, Corey. Denny, what other questions might we answer for you? And I maybe give folks a chance to additionally submit any questions, and also check the chat box here to make sure we've not missed anybody here in the chat box. If you do happen to check the chat box as an attendee, you'll see that Brian from our team has given you a direct web link, so you don't have to type out that inbondbank.com website, so that there's a link directly to our page for that program. And that link contains both the schedule and the links to the participation survey.
Well, this is Denny, and I think you've answered some of the questions that have been brought to me, and I appreciate that. And again, I think this is helpful, especially for our newer members who may not have went through this before, our newer superintendents, our newer business officials, or maybe they've never even had to think about this before. But again, we do thank you for giving us this information. This time I don't have anything new myself, because again, the questions that I had, you have answered.
Thank you. And Denny, it looks like we've given some time. Jake's asked a couple of questions here, and Angie, I may have you take these. Jake wants to talk a little more about the limits, either on the low side or the high end for borrowing. So Angie, you want to dive a little bit deeper into
Sure.
what we in terms of the borrowing sizing?
Sure. So after you complete your cash flow, what we'll do is we will look to see which month you're going to run into a negative cash balance. So which month you would actually anticipate needing those note proceeds. In reviewing your cash flow, you're limited to borrowing the lesser of your largest deficit, that second really 6 months of the year, or up to 80% of your property tax levy. Or if you're borrowing in your education fund, we also allow you to borrow up to 80% of your December tuition support. So those are the maximums. Really just trying to make sure that you're borrowing the amount that you need to get you through the end of the year and keep your cash flow positive.
Very good. Thank you, Angie. Jake, I hope that answered your question. You are welcome. Dave asks if you participated in the full year 2020 advanced funding program in January and have a June repayment date, will that be revised considering the change in expected receipts? So Brad, you want to take that one? And I don't know if you can see the question. I can restate it.
Hey, Mark, this is Ron. Is this a June payment date?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, we are working on providing information on that. We don't have that finalized, but what we'll do is provide you information on what is due on June 30th, and we will probably look at your draws and do an analysis to see if any payment is due. But we will look at the payments that are due on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. And we will be reaching out certainly to all the 2020 Advanced Funding Program participants. Gosh, it feels like a lifetime ago in January when we closed that program. But yeah, to Denny's point, for those who haven't worked with the program, even in a regular year, we're working with 20 to 25 to 30 units of government around the state, just through a normal cycle. And so we'll certainly be in contact and communication with folks who have outstanding advanced funding notes with us. And Greg asks a good question, kind of looking ahead to the repayment. Do we repay this from the fund when revenues are available, or does this go into a debt service payment?
So Mark, this is Ange. So each of those repayments we pay from the fund that you borrow in. So for example, if you're borrowing against your debt service property taxes, when you receive your property tax collection and debt service, those property taxes would be used to repay that warrant. If you're looking to borrow in your operations fund, when you receive your operations property taxes, those property taxes would be used to repay that operations warrant. So we really look at these as individual borrowings for each of the different funds you're participating in. And Dennis may also, Otten's on the line, who is, as you mentioned, is QE counsel. Dennis may have something to add there as well.
Yeah, thanks. The only thing I would add that is if you've got funds and debt service available that you wanted to use to pay this, you could use those to pay the interest expense. And so we leave that option open in the documents we send to applicants in the program.
Thank you. Before we get to the next question, Denny, I think you've got this is some of the most kind membership that we've spoken to. I think every question we've answered, the asker has typed us a thank you note. So that's very sweet. You don't have to do that. But yeah, we just enjoy this conversation as much as you do, because it truly helps us think through these interesting situations in this crazy time, and make the program better and more responsive to your needs. We've got a question, gosh, even another assist here. This is to this point of how great your membership is, Denny. Eric suggests for newer participants, we might share where they can find their top 10 taxpayers, assess values, where they get the top 5 employers. Those are some of the questions asked. That's a great thing, because that's not, yeah, you don't just fall into the job and know where to find that stuff, right? So for new participants, Angie, do you want to kind of unlock some of those secrets where some of that information can be found?
Sure. So for much of the information, we try to pull in-house, because we know that we want to try to keep your time limited as we can, so that you can continue to do what you need to do. For those couple questions, those are ones that we do look to you all to provide. For your top employers, we always suggest reaching out to and going to your county's Chamber of Commerce website, or if you're in a larger urban area, you probably have a city Chamber of Commerce. That information is usually published on their website. So just whatever most recent information you can pull from there is a good source. When it comes to your large taxpayers, that information you can always go to if you've been in the bond market recently. Go back to maybe a fresher official statement where maybe you pulled that before. Pull from maybe your continuing disclosure if you've already kind of started working on that, and again have debt outstanding, so you're not having to recreate the wheel. And then if that is new to you and you don't have already a document where maybe you've had to pull that information, your county auditor would be able to provide that to you. So you just simply make a request to them that you need your top 10 taxpayers that make up your unit. So those are, I think, helpful hints on where to get that information.
Hey, Angie, this is Ron. Just to add, if you use those resources and you come up empty, send an email to midyear@inbondbank.com, and we have a staff person who will also search and then try and find that information. He is the one who does the continuing disclosure filings, and he has resources where he may be able to find that information. So if you hit a roadblock, please email us and we'll see if we can find some of that information for you. Again, it's at midyear@inbondbank.com. You can email us, and we will see if we can search and find that information for you.
Great. Thank you, Eric, and for the question, Angie and Ron for the answer. Ron, this maybe another one for you. Tracy's asking, where do we find the fillable cash flow template?
When we receive your survey, we will email you the packet, and that will be that packet will include an application and cash flows, and we will get that to you. If you have not received it yet, or you just want to see the template, you can email again at midyear@inbondbank.com and request that cash flow template, and we'll email it to you. But typically we get the survey, and once we get that survey, then we send that application information out.
Very good. And we'll make sure to have a link to there's a link in the chat box to get to our website where the survey is located. And again, that survey takes maybe 30 seconds to fill out and submit, and then you'll be able to send that cash flow template out to you. Michelle's asking whether an additional appropriation has to be done in each fund to pay the note back.
This is Dennis. I'll go ahead and take this one. It does not need to be done. We've got all the authorizations in the document set up, as Angie mentioned, for payments from the funds from which the warrants are issued against. And I would say with respect to the debt service fund, if you're going to pay interest on that, if you've got to transfer money to that fund to do that, you would need an appropriation, but if the money's there, you wouldn't need the appropriation.
Michelle, I hope that answered your question. It did? Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Angie, I think another one from Eric. He's, as you look at question 5 in the operating profile, budgeted sources of revenue for participating, non-participating funds. I know you've touched on that a little bit earlier, why that question is important. His question is, do you want 2019 actual and 2020 budgeted?
So on that question, I think I'm not, make sure I understand which question we're looking at. So is it the one we just kind of want I would assume just the kind of the profile of the unit? That's really just trying to get an overall picture of what that your revenue profiles look like. So kind of, I would probably suggest you resource just your budget docs. When you put your budget together, you have the overall monies coming in from property taxes, other resources, really just giving the rating agencies an idea of what the makeup of your unit is. That's a little bit different than the participating, non-participating fund question mark. So I wanted to make sure I was addressing the right one. Again, the participating, non-participating funds, we share cash flows with the rating agencies. Those funds that you need to borrow in are participating funds. Other funds that you're not borrowing in, it's helpful for us to show what your cash position is. It just allows them to get a better feel for all the QEs that participate in the program, and it helps us out on the rating side.
Dr. Harmon's asking, if a school did not input interest on temporary loans into their 2020 budget, do they need to request an additional appropriation to now pay that interest from the debt fund, assuming cash is available?
This is Dennis. I'll go ahead and answer that. No, an appropriation is not required as long as you've got money in the debt service fund to make that. We've checked into that, and appropriation isn't necessary.
Good, thank you, Dennis. Ross is asking, is there a resolution required by the school board? Dennis, you just want to stay on the mic?
Yeah, I'll answer that, and I'm going to flesh that out a little bit as well. When we get these, for those that haven't participated recently in the program, it'll be new to you, but for those that have, it'll be very much like you've done in the past. We will send out a packet that will include a resolution for the board to adopt that will authorize the warrants, and that will include the maximum amount you can borrow based on information that comes from your cash flows. And your board will need to adopt that. And in that same email, we'll include all of the documents for the program, and including a set of signature pages. So we try to make it as easy and user-friendly as possible. And we've got staff on board here, and we'll give you their names and contact information, and feel free to reach out to us at any time if you've got questions or anything about the documents that you want to ask us. We'll be available for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Good question from Jake, and just I think as probably many of you are being thoughtful. If our question from Jake is, our cash balances are strong, but we want to be careful with our cash reserves due to probable shortages, might we be denied for the program? So I think that maybe, if I understand, maybe getting to, yes, if we were to pull from various nooks and crannies, we could make these debt service payments, and meet those obligations or meet any of those big expenditures that we have coming up. But from maybe a cash management standpoint, that may not be the most fiscally prudent thing to do. How do we navigate that situation? And how do we show that, how to really show that on our cash flow statement or the cash flow worksheet?
Sure. So when we're reviewing your cash flow, we are looking at the cash flow on a fund by fund basis. we are not looking at your rainy day fund balance if you have money sitting in a rainy day fund. We're really looking at this on a cash flow basis, on a per fund basis, and that you must show a cash flow deficit in the fund to be able to borrow. We need to be able to make sure that that we're loaning funds because there is a shortfall actually expected. When you're filling out the cash flows, I always recommend just having your budget that was adopted as your handy tool, and maybe your Form 9, using those estimates. I know many times when you have your budgets approved, you're always expecting that you're not going to spend every dollar that may be approved, that some of that will be retained for fund balance. I think to be conservative and to address maybe some of that question and concern, assume that here's what our budget was. If we spend every dollar, here's what that cash flow looks like. And that way, I think that it would allow you then to borrow for that fund, but also being able to maintain some of that existing fund balance and cash outside, like you were thinking about.
That's a great answer. And with the ability to prepay or pay early in 30 days or so, it should make it a flexible tool. A question from Serena: in December, if we do not collect a high percent of property tax revenue, are there rollover options? Or kind of stated more broadly, what happens if they're not able to repay the borrowed amount, the tax anticipation warrant amount? Obviously that's, as the question states, these are crazy times. That'd be certainly unusual, but
I mean, I guess I can take a stab at that. At this point, I will look at the program really as a mismatch in timing of receipts. Based on what we've heard from like estate actions and the executive orders, right now December should be collected on time. I realize there's concerns that, well, what if just kind of our tax base is struggling, they can't make those property tax payments. The program, as you see, is really why we limit that borrowing to the lesser of that deficit or 80% of your taxes. So we never let QEs borrow up to 100%, because we really are trying to build in for some of that coverage to make sure that there's some cushion there to address any I would say, natural cash flow shortfalls due to revenue collection issues themselves, as opposed to cash restraints. I mean, the assumption is that we would expect full payment by the end of the year. So if there are concerns that you're working through, or I would say kind of reach out to the bond bank and we'll take a look at your cash flows and work through those together to make sure that what we're looking at makes sense, and to see if we need to just kind of walk through together on some of those. I don't know if Ron, if you have anything else to add on that end.
Sure. I agree, Angie, that we anticipate revenues to be paid off on December 31st of 2020, but keep in mind that we will certainly have a program in 2021 if you can pay off your warrants and then need to borrow again for payroll or something that comes up in January 2021. The other thing is, and we can't look in a crystal ball and see the future, but if there is a need for a rollover program and all the property taxes are not collected and distributed by December 31st, we would certainly look at rolling over your notes if there's anticipated revenues for 2020 taxes that will not be distributed until 2021.
Yeah, thank you both, and thank you for the question. I love this, talking with or dialoguing with, even virtually, this group. I mean, like your foresight and the questions you're asking show that you're thinking about some of these hard and complex questions, and you're thinking not just about now, but you're thinking about the future. And I think that's I think again why we've had such a good long-standing relationship between our teams, because we're always, I think, thinking about just our constituencies and our organizations and how to leave them in the best possible position for the future. And I can tell from these questions, you're all, wrestling with a lot of the same issues. And, as we close, I'd like to thank you for the robust discussion. I think you could tell from some of the questions we had some, you've got some veterans on the phone on this webinar who have used the program in the past. I think to the extent, if they're willing to kind of, raise their hands maybe outside this context, or speak with Denny, to be a resource for you. You certainly have the team here at the Indiana Bond Bank. Don't hesitate to talk to us, but just know that you've got other school business officials who've you kind of paved the way before and have used the program in perhaps simpler times. And I think you can tell from the questions and the dialogue here, you've got a great team of colleagues who are willing to be resources and help you navigate through some of this. So I will make sure we end here on just very lastly, and Brian, this is in the chat box. Also, this direct link. He's got a link to a draft cash flow. You've got the email address there. Any questions, any and all questions, that's being monitored regularly as a one-stop email dedicated just to this particular program because we know it's a need. I appreciate the feedback here in the question box of the webinar being helpful for you, that the application is, to use the quote, so easy. We love to hear that. Really have worked to cut the red tape and to streamline this so that it's accessible and it's easy and it meets your needs, because that's what we're here for. If it's not meeting your needs, we're not doing our job. So please reach out. You've heard our voices. Hopefully you've seen our faces, and we look forward to serving you. Keep doing great things for the state of Indiana, and we'll talk soon. Thank you guys so much for your time and your attention today. Take care.